Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
All right, Andrew, we are back again. Welcome.
Yes, back again for another podcast. Exciting.
So today we're talking about identifying and maximising your surplus, the second step in our 6-step process.
Yeah, this is a really important one and probably the most important out of, I don't want to pick favourites like picking your favourite child, but one of the most important steps is there's no surplus, then nothing else can happen.
Yeah, 100%. This is crucial. If you get this part right, this actually sets the foundation up to be able to reach your financial goals and really set you up for a life of financial freedom. So if you nail this one, you're definitely on your path to that financial freedom. If you don't get this right, you're always going to struggle. That's what we see time and time again. It's really imperative, and we've got some juicy stuff to cover. We might kick it off with the budget.
Yeah, well, hopefully by this stage, you've already done your budget. You've already done step one. You know your current financial position, and whether you've sort of done that with any of the free online tools, whether you've done that with old school pen and paper, and whether that's in Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is, the budget should already have been done by now based on the current position. What we're talking about and what we're looking to do today is maximize that budget and get the most out of it.
So just on that point with the budget, you hit a really good point there. Using pen, paper, spreadsheet, there's some really great online tools.
Yeah.
As well too, but the key is just do whatever works for you. It doesn't need to be War and Peace. It just needs to be as accurate and realistic as possible as well, because there's a bit of a difference. Every time I've done mine, there's the reality of the budget versus how I perceive it should be and how it should look. But you really need to find something that works for you, and you need to be realistic with what you're putting in there, because even if you've got an issue or you identify an issue with your budget, the only way that you're going to be able to fix it or pay attention to it or concentrate on it is if you actually know what it is that you're looking at. And if the numbers that you've put there, if they don't jump out at you, then this whole thing doesn't work. So you need to be realistic as possible. And then we can move towards working towards that position where we trim up certain things or we identify certain things that we want to concentrate on, bits and pieces like that. I guess the takeout from that is use a tool that works for you. There's no right or wrong. And just when you put your budget together, just make sure it's realistic and representative of what's actually happening in reality, as opposed to what you think should be happening or what you hope should be happening.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a family of 4 and you've got grocery bills at $15 a week, I don't think that's going to be accurate.
That's true. All right. So the first one was sort out your budget. So pretty straightforward. Andrew, where do we go to after that?
Yeah. So look, one of the sort of crucial next steps, and whether there's opportunity in this or not is completely up to your own personal circumstances. But from there, what you want to look at is you want to increase your income as much as possible. So you want to make sure that you're drawing as much income into your household as you possibly can. Now, if you're working and you're an employee, then have a look at those tools online as to whether you're getting paid enough and whether there's opportunity to ask for a pay rise. If you've got a side business or if you've got an opportunity to I was reading something the other day where there was the largest increase in people starting up side businesses during COVID. So if you've been thinking about it and you haven't actually done it, well, now's a great time. Get that side business going, get some additional income flowing into the household, and make sure that you're drawing as much income in as possible. And sort of the other thing that all too often we see people kind of forget about is you're an investment property. Most people, you're buying an investment property and the purpose of it is to make money. It's not for any other reason than to sort of make sure that you're growing your assets with it. If you haven't had a rent review for a while, or if you haven't reviewed the rent that your tenants are paying, make sure that you're reviewing that. Make sure that you're getting as much out of that rental property as possible, because that's what it's there for and that's what it's designed for.
Yeah, that's one that sort of goes under the radar a fair bit. We just take it for granted. If you do have an investment property, you're kind of happy that the tenant is in there paying rent every month, and it's an easy one that's missed. So you need to make sure that your rent you are charging someone is market competitive, but also with your work as well too, making sure that that's in line with the rest of the market and that's competitive in terms of the services that you're offering your employer. And yeah, definitely with the side businesses, interesting point that you mentioned about COVID. Give it a shot. You've got nothing to lose. The opportunity to be able to do stuff from home has never been greater, especially with all of the tools that we've got available from a technology perspective. Yeah, get in there, go for it and see what happens. Absolutely. So increasing income, pretty straightforward. I'd love to say it's easier said than done, but it's one of those things that it's not as easy as it is. Everybody would love to increase their income, I'm sure. So what we tend to pay a lot more attention to is the next part of the process, which is actually looking at examining the expenses and seeing what we can do from an expense perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have a look at, once you've put that budget together, have a look at where are you overspending? Are you eating out 3 times a week when really you should be eating out 2? Or that second coffee every day is approximately, and we just put some rough numbers together, is $1,500 a year. Like, for a second coffee, is it worth it? Do you just go for an instant coffee in the office, or do you put that towards an annual holiday? But make sure that you're got a keen eye over your expenses and you're looking to minimize those expenses as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting one about the coffee. I mean, being in Melbourne, we all love coffee, and definitely that second coffee, you put a price on that. If you're getting a second cup of coffee every day at $4, it's roughly $1,500 a year. You're right, there's an annual holiday. Yeah. Ordinarily, you wouldn't have that money available to be able to spend on that, but is that something that you'd be prepared to sacrifice in order to pay for a holiday rather than needing to find another $1,500 somewhere else? So yeah, small changes like that can make a substantial difference. And that kind of brings me on to when we think about our budget and managing and cutting our expenses, being realistic around these small changes, like that second cup of coffee every day, versus these massive changes that are going to be absolutely life-changing. And it's really difficult to think about and digest those things. So I think start with the small changes. And if you get those right, you get a little bit of momentum. They can tend to go a long way, like the example that we just used before. But these small changes versus the drastic changes is really the way to do it. And you're looking for the small wins here and there across your budget and across your expenses. Yeah,
absolutely. And make sure that you're just reviewing things on a regular basis. I mean, if you've got private health insurance or if you've got your car insurance, make sure that you're looking at, is it market competitive? Have I just not looked at it for 3 years and the premiums have creeped up and all of a sudden I'm paying way more than I should be? Look for as many of those wins as possible as you can in your budget.
Those ones tend to creep up. You're absolutely right, especially with the insurances or those things that are annual bills that come along.
Those things that you don't want to look at. It's pretty,
and they're pretty expensive as well too, but they tend to move quite handsomely. Every time there's a renewal notice, the percentage increase is absolute ridiculous in most cases. So take that as an opportunity to be able to review those and go to market as well too. There's so many free online comparison tools. If you get that right, you can keep your expenses, I think, year in, year out with those big bills, subject to a few things like your registration and stuff. We can't do much about that. But if you review them when the big ones come around, you can really get yourself into a position where you shouldn't be paying that much more year in, year out.
Yeah, and hit the nail on the head before as well, Billy, when you're talking about some of the bigger ones as well. So there's sort of one pretty massive one, and for most people, that's either the rental property that you're renting in, making sure that you're paying market competitive rates, or an opportunity like, do you need that third bedroom that's just sitting there as a storage, or can you get away with a garage underneath that's lock up for storage? Or the interest rate on your mortgage, is it competitive? That's one that can save thousands of dollars a year if you haven't reviewed it in the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. So examining expenses, looking at where you're overspending, looking for the small wins versus the big drastic changes, put a plan in place to reduce those expenses, and then review them on an annual basis seems to be the message here.
Yeah, and have some fun with it. Set some targets and goals for yourself. This week, I'm not going to buy any coffees out, and create a bit of a game with it. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit of a geek in this, and most people think that that's horrible rather than fun, but create some goals and celebrate it. Great. This week I've done amazing. Woohoo. Make it a little bit enjoyable. It doesn't always have to be bad news and depressing.
I'm getting coffee withdrawals just thinking about that, Andrew. So we'll see how we go with that one anyway. The next part of the process, creating a bucketing strategy. So this tends to get fairly detailed. If we manage to nail this, this will put our budget and our cash flow and protecting our surplus essentially on autopilot. So even though we're going to go into a little bit of detail here, if we manage to get this right, this is really the crux of it. And this is the foundation of setting ourselves up and being able to really protect sort of what's coming in, what's going out more in particular. So bucketing strategy.
Yeah, this is absolutely the key. I mean, creating a bucketing strategy and making sure that it's all happening as smoothly as possible is a really, really important step, because at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that there's a bit of work up front when you're running through maximising your surplus. From a day-to-day basis, you don't even want to be thinking about it. You want to make sure that all of this stuff is just on autopilot and it's all happening seamlessly. And it doesn't feel like you're constantly just keeping an eye on money and spending and all of that stuff every single day. So yeah, Billy, take us through. How does the bucketing strategy work? How do you get started? What do we do with it all?
You hit the nail on the head. The key is sustainability. So you don't want to make this too difficult. You want to make it as easy as possible, because managing money shouldn't be difficult, but can be. And because there's so many transactions coming out of people's accounts, all got bills to pay, we all do certain things with our money, you want to make it as easy as you possibly can. So essentially the first part of this is fairly easy and fairly straightforward. Every source of income that you've got goes into one account. Pretty straightforward. That's just so from a maintenance perspective, you know what's coming in and you know what your total income is. So we go back to the different income streams that we were talking about before. Whatever they are, they all go into the one account. We'll talk about this a little bit later on in the next topic when we get onto it. But if we're managing debt, that's usually an offset account. We'll just put that aside for now. But just conceptually, all your income goes into one bucket. Then from there?
Yeah, so from there, there's really sort of 5 accounts that you want to sort of open up from there. And we'll run through each and every single one of them in detail as to sort of what it is and what happens with it. The 5 accounts that you want to have, really, you want a bills account, and those bills are the direct debit bills. So you're talking about your rates, your water, your insurance. If there's, again, as Billy said, we'll talk about this in the next episode, but if there's any credit card or personal loan debt, that's the account that it all sort of comes from. So make sure all the bills that you can direct debit, whether it's rates, water, insurance, all of that stuff, that's one of the accounts. Take that out because you can't really do too much with it. You don't have too much discretion, but the first one is all the bills that you're direct debiting. That's a source of income or a source of expense that you can pretty accurately just direct debit to every single, whether you do that on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or a fortnightly basis. The direct debit bills, sort of out of mind, out of sight, set a direct debit and make sure that there's an account to pay for all of those.
The easiest way that I like to think about these is the bills that get sent to you. So if something comes in the mail, you can set it up as a direct debit. If something gets emailed to you, if you're electronic, you can set it up as that. So from the easiest way to think about it from my end, I think is the bills that get sent to you, sit in that category and sit in that bucket. Set those up as a direct debit, set and forget. You manage to review those when you do your budget, but you also review them to make sure that you're not overpaying when you do your annual review with all of your expenses anyway. So even though it is set and forget, from a simplicity perspective, it is something that you're going to make sure that we're doubling back on every year just to make sure that it's still competitive in terms of what you're paying for what you're getting in the market. Then we move on to the next bucket.
Yeah, so the next bucket are those bills that you can't actually direct debit. So these are the bills that you're pretty much paying for either with your savings card, or whether it's from a credit card, whatever it is. These are the bills that you're paying for at point of sale. So really, you're talking about the petrol, the grocery expenses, the taking your car to the mechanic expenses. So all of those bills that you can't set up via direct debit, that don't get sent to you, you're paying for in a separate account. And that's the bills at point of sale account. I think we've got to come up with a better name for that. But
No, you're absolutely right. But I think that captures it. The bills or the expenses that you have to pay for in person when you're there. Pretty straightforward. That seems to be the easiest way. But yeah, I think you're right, Andrew. I think we do need a better name for it. But that's the way that I differentiate between those two categories, is the expenses or the bills that get sent to you was the first one. And then the ones that don't are the ones that you pay for at that point of sale. So they're the two between those ones. And I imagine that that's pretty straightforward. And then we've got a third bucket.
Yeah, so the third bucket is the exciting stuff. This is the fun account. This is what you're going out with, you're spending on a night out, you're going to restaurants with all of your expenses, all of that stuff that's just fun is all coming out of that one account. And Billy will sort of talk about this in a little bit more, but this is the account that you want to keep a keen eye on. This is the one that can get away from you. So you're going to set an amount that's going to go towards going out and fun and set a realistic amount. I mean, this is not meant to be a part of the process that's really difficult and you feel like you can't catch up with your friends or go out and it's impeding on your life. This should be something that you set a realistic amount that you can direct debit towards fun on a fortnightly or weekly basis, however you're sort of wanting to run through this. But you want to make sure that you're setting an amount that's realistic and setting an amount that you can keep to.
Yeah, really valid point. The whole point of going through this exercise is to try and put a little bit of discipline around the flow of your money. You don't want to go too hard and leave yourself short, so you can't enjoy things in life that you enjoy doing. Once again, you don't want to go overs with that as well too, and then you're actually spending more than you should be on those things. So as long as you're realistic about it, but the key is we look at the overall budget based on your income, your overall expenses, and essentially this category or this bucket in particular, we assign a certain percent of your income. And the idea is you match what you've got in there to your expenses that you want to spend on going out, drinks with mates, going to dinner, going to the movies, whatever it may be. And the idea is that at the end of each pay cycle, if that account is empty or depleted, then you've had your fun for that particular point in time, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, monthly, you match it to your payroll cycle or your income cycle. And if you end up depleting that account early, then that's it. You've had your fun for that particular period in time and you're basically stuck at home not doing anything else. But you don't want to go too conservative with this and you don't want to go overs as well. You just want to be realistic because you do want to have a life and you do want to be able to have some fun. So I think that's the message out of the back of that.
Yeah, this is all about making your life easier. This is all about making sure that you don't have to constantly think about money rather than sort of the other way around. So this is set the direct debit towards all of the things that you want to do and sort of focus all of your attention on one thing. Like your bills are things that you can look at, but you're not going to look at on a weekly or regular basis. So the one account out of all of this that you're going to have to keep an eye on, instead of having to think about every single time you get paid, you're thinking about bills, you're thinking about savings, you're thinking about going out, you're thinking about all of those things. What this strategy should do is focus all of your time, all of your attention on the fun expense side of things. So all that you're looking at on a regular basis is making sure that you're not overspending here. Everything else will happen automatically.
If you set it up correctly and you do overspend, then there's no money in the account. The discipline around this is not to take anything out of another account. If you set it correctly and you don't touch it, then go for your life. And if you run short by 3 days, then so be it. But the key is exactly that. Don't take money out of a different account because then it'll cause all sorts of issues and throw everything into chaos.
And the first time that you do it, it breaks that mental barrier and it becomes easier and easier to do it every time. So making sure that you don't take money out of the accounts, not even once, is imperative to all of this. But yeah, the next part of this and the next account, Billy, what's that?
So I think this is the one that we like to pay the most amount of attention on. And if we manage to get this right, as in the discipline with this system, this one is the one that I find resonates with most people. Although it's been a little bit challenging of late just because of what's going on in the world and stuff, but it's actually having a separate account to put money in towards a holiday.
Yeah.
And that holiday is different for different people. The amount of money that goes in there is going to be different for different people, and there's no right or wrong. But what we find is that it's usually something in the medium term that you're putting money towards. So the reason why we do this is you don't go through your year and get to the end of the year or whatever your time frame is, and then turn around and say, geez, it's been a big year. I need to go on a holiday, or I want to go on a holiday. I've got to recharge the batteries, or I want to chase the sun because it's too cold where I am, or whatever it may be. And then you get to that stage, you're exhausted, you're tired, you go, I need to do this, but I don't have the money to do it. So what happens? Put it on your credit card, take some consumer debt, and before you know it, you're on that rat race again and you're chasing your tail. So what we do is we like to plan for these events, and we put a certain amount in based off our income and expenses and the budget that we've created. We put a certain percentage of income into a holiday bucket So we know that that's building up, like I said, week in, week out, fortnight in, fortnight out, depending on what your cycle is. And you can see that growing. And depending on where you're going with your holiday and how much you want to spend, you can actually time it. You can turn around and say, hey, it's growing by X amount of hundreds of dollars per pay cycle. I know that in 3 pay cycles or 6 pay cycles or whatever it may be, I can go on that holiday that I want. And then the great part about this, Andrew, is that you don't have to worry about where you're going to get the money to pay for it.
Absolutely. I mean, really hit the nail on the head there. It's just planning for those expenses and giving you peace of mind that, yeah, I'm going to have that holiday every year and I know exactly what it's going to be and how much I'm going to need to spend on it. And you don't even have to have the holiday plan. So you don't need to say, I want to spend $10,000 a year on holidays or 5 or whatever the number is. Knowing that that account's gotten to $1,500 because I've saved the money on that second coffee. Well, all right, I can do a weekend away and take the money out of the holiday account. And every time it gets to a number that is decent enough to go on the type of holiday that you want to, you know that you can spend it. And really, it's just giving you that peace of mind that, yep, I'm gonna go on a holiday. I'm going to recharge the batteries every year. And I know that it's something that we've all been missing, just given the state of the world at the moment. So if that holiday account doesn't get depleted, well, hey, happy days. It can roll into an even bigger and better holiday once we're all out of this.
It's going to be a pretty big bucket by the time we can get our hands on it and start depleting it and deploy that around the world, I think. So, but geez, what a time that's going to be.
Yeah.
And then that brings us to the last bucket that we talk about, our savings and investing bucket. So this is the one where, more so from a longer term wealth creation perspective, is where we're putting money aside as well too, because we don't want to use or spend everything that we're earning and everything that we're keeping. We want to keep some to put towards long-term wealth creation. So the last bucket that we talk about is the saving and the investing bucket.
Yeah, this is the stuff that most people are coming to see us, and this is the entry point for most people into financial planning. And so you sort of need to scale back when a client comes to see you and sort of say, all right, yeah, great, we are going to get to the savings and investment side of things, but that only happens if there's a surplus. What should be going towards the saving and investment, as well as sort of staying as afloat in that income account where all of the money's coming into, that's the surplus income that you've identified in your budget. So once you've got a surplus income in your budget, once you can start saving and investing, because if there isn't a surplus income, then you sort of can't do too much with it. But this is the fun stuff. This is the exciting stuff. This is the money that's going towards all of those investments and all of those things that are going to improve your life in the future. So this is the real exciting and fun part of financial planning, is making sure that there's a surplus income and a regular amount that goes sort of towards the savings and investment. And we know what that's going to be. And we identify that from the budget and all of the steps that we're taking here.
Yeah, so ultimately this is about identifying your income and your expenses, essentially trapping and maximising your surplus, and then using that surplus for a wealth creation purpose from an investing perspective. That's really what we're trying to achieve with this whole system here. We'll talk a little bit more about wealth creation and investing further in the podcast series, but essentially that's kind of what we're trying to achieve with this system, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get to that position and stay in that position as well too, because you can earn a significant amount of money, but if you can't control your expenditure and you can't identify and maintain a surplus, then really it makes no difference how much money you earn, because you're just on that merry-go-round, you're just on that rat race. So essentially that's what we're trying to do. And this strategy works for people on different income brackets. So it's not like this has to work or this only works if you're earning a certain amount of money. Identifying and trapping your surplus and doing something with it can work regardless of your income levels. And we're just trying to make that as seamless and as straightforward and as easy as possible. To add a little bit more complexity in this, we always hear about and we always talk about having an emergency fund as well too. Andrew, how does the emergency fund, or what is the emergency fund and how does it fit into what we're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, look, life always throws us curveballs, so you're not sure exactly what's going to come up today, tomorrow, next month, or next year. So you want to make sure that there's some emergency money there for any unexpected expenses. So your car's broken down and you didn't expect that, and that's not accounted for in your budget. Anything that's happened that you haven't accounted for or that you're not expecting, you want to make sure that there's a surplus income. You want to make sure that there's an emergency account in order to be able to take advantage of those things. And where that emergency account and sort of where we see that fit in is that income account. So the amount of money that goes into that income account, so the first account where everything goes into, that should always sit at your emergency fund level. So let's say your emergency fund is, or let's say that you want to have an emergency fund of whatever, $5,000. The moment, or that account should always sit at a minimum balance of $5,000. So you never spend any money out of that income account that's going to reduce it or deplete it beyond that level. And I mean, you can sort of take this as far as you like, or you can make this as complex as you like. You can also set an upper limit for that account. So some of the amazing things that we've seen is people have an upper limit of an amount above your emergency expenses, and now you've got some decisions to make. What do you do with that upper limit? Does that go towards the fun account? Does that go towards the holiday account? Or the things that we love to see, does that go towards your savings and investment if you're above a certain number?
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And the key is with the emergency fund, really it is in case something does go wrong. So we're not talking huge amounts of money, but what does tend to happen is it creates that peace of mind. Yeah. So you know that if something does happen, you don't have to panic. You don't have to think, oh, geez, where am I going to get this money from? You don't have to think, I don't have any money because my hot water has blown up, so I need to borrow money from someone, or I need to put it on my credit card, or whatever it may be. So in reality, it's probably more of a peace of mind mechanism than anything, and just gives you confidence that you've got something to fall back on and not needing to chase your tail in terms of how you're going to cover it. So it's what we find is it tends to be more of a peace of mind. And in terms of getting that emergency fund, in terms of the whole process, we pay off our consumer debt first. That would be the first thing that we'd be focusing on from our perspective. Then we'd be building that emergency fund to whatever that level is, or whatever that number is for that particular scenario or for your particular circumstances. And then once we've got that emergency fund, we can then start putting money into that last bucket that we were talking about, being the savings and the investing bucket. Because there's no point in doing that unless you've got the system set up right and you've got essentially all of your bases covered.
Yeah, so a bit of a high level summary. Money goes into an income account. Money goes into the account that all of your income's coming into. From there, we've got 5 buckets. So there's the bills that you're direct debiting, there's the bills of point of sale, there's the fun account, the holiday account, and then there's the saving and investment account. So all of your money should be tied up within this strategy and should give you peace of mind at the end of the day that I'm doing all of the right steps and I'm doing all of the right things in order to make sure that my money's working for me and I'm really maximizing that surplus as much as possible.
Pretty straightforward, Andrew. Identify the surplus, trap the surplus, and then do something with it.
Absolutely.
Pretty straightforward. So everyone, this is the end of this episode. We hope you got some value out of it and look forward to chatting to you next time.
Yeah, hope you guys had as much fun listening to it as we did recording it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and it is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.